Damon Whitaker was 42 years old, and for most of his life, people mistook his quietness for weakness. He had built a routine around responsibility, not attention. Every morning before sunrise, he made coffee strong enough to taste like smoke, answered the first wave of logistics emails before the city was fully awake, and walked the same 6 blocks from his parking garage to the glass tower where Whitaker Systems now occupied 3 full floors above downtown Charlotte. The building had polished stone floors, silent elevators, and windows tall enough to make the city look like a model beneath his feet, but Damon still arrived with the same worn leather briefcase he had carried when nobody returned his calls. He remembered those years clearly. The cheap desk lamp in a rented back office. The cold noodles eaten over a cracked laptop. The way his hands used to smell like printer ink and gas station coffee. Even now, with a company valued at $300 million and investors waiting on his signature, he still held doors for cleaning staff, still knew the security guard's daughter had just started college, still corrected small errors in shipping forecasts himself because details mattered. That was what Monica had never understood. She had seen patience and called it lack of ambition. She had seen discipline and called it small thinking. She had seen a man building slowly, carefully, and decided he was not building anything at all. By 8:17 that Thursday morning, Damon stood alone in his corner office, watching pale winter light spread over the rooftops. The city was waking beneath him in layers, brake lights on Tryon Street, steam lifting from a diner vent, a black SUV idling near the curb below. On the oak conference table behind him, a stack of final acquisition documents waited beside a silver pen and a glass of water he had not touched. His reflection in the window looked calm, tailored, almost unfamiliar. 3 years ago, he had left a house with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a sentence from his ex-wife that had followed him like a shadow. Let him keep the business idea. It is worth nothing. He had never repeated those words aloud. He did not need to. They had carved themselves into memory. His office phone buzzed once, soft but sharp in the quiet room. Damon turned from the window and pressed the speaker button. Yes, Alicia. His assistant's voice came through carefully measured, the way people spoke when they were trying not to sound alarmed. Mr. Whitaker, there's someone here to see you. Damon glanced at the clock. The investor group was not due for another 20 minutes. Who? A pause. Small, but he caught it. Damon had built an entire company by noticing pauses. Monica Whitaker, Alicia said. The name landed without sound, but something in the room changed. Damon looked past the conference table, past the signed prototypes framed on the wall, past the awards he had never bothered to hang straight. For a moment, he saw another room instead, a kitchen counter, divorce papers spread under yellow light, Monica's perfume in the air, her pen moving across the last page like she was signing a receipt. He did not sit down. He did not raise his voice. Is she alone? Another pause. No, sir. She brought an attorney. Something felt wrong. Not because Monica had come back. Damon had known success had a way of waking people who had slept through your struggle. What felt wrong was the timing. The deal on his table was not public yet. The final valuation had not been announced. Only 6 people outside the company had seen the number. He walked to his desk, opened the security monitor with 2 clicks, and watched the lobby camera fill his screen. Then he saw it. Monica stood near the marble reception wall in a cream coat that looked expensive from a distance, her posture straight, her chin lifted, one hand gripping a phone too tightly. Beside her was a man Damon recognized from the letterhead that had arrived by courier 2 days earlier, Bradley Pierce. Dark suit. Polished shoes. A leather folder tucked under one arm. Damon studied the image without blinking. Monica looked around the lobby as if she was measuring what she believed she had missed. Bradley said something Damon could not hear. She nodded once. Too confident. Too prepared. Before we go deeper into what he discovered that morning, tell us where you are watching from and do not forget to subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Damon closed the monitor, opened the top drawer of his desk, and removed the unopened courier envelope he had left there on purpose. He had not responded to it. Not yet. The paper was thick, the kind lawyers used when they wanted intimidation to feel professional. He slid one finger under the flap and unfolded the demand letter slowly, reading every line again as if the words might become less absurd with repetition. Monica was claiming marital contribution. Emotional support. Shared conceptual development. A financial interest in Whittaker Systems. Damon's eyes stopped on one sentence near the bottom. Mr. Whittaker is advised not to alter, transfer, conceal, or dispose of any business assets pending equitable review. He almost smiled, but did not. The detail did not match. Monica had signed away any claim to future business assets 3 years ago, and she had done it eagerly because she believed his future was worthless. He stayed silent. He reached for his phone, not to call Monica, but to call Denise Caldwell, the only attorney who knew where the old divorce file was stored. As the line began to ring, Damon looked once more at the city beyond the glass, then down at the black SUV still idling by the curb. Its rear door opened, and a second man stepped out carrying a slim gray folder Damon had never seen before. 3 years earlier, Damon Whittaker was not the man whose name appeared on investor decks or acquisition documents. He was 39 then, still working as a senior operations analyst for a regional freight company on the south side of Charlotte, still wearing dress shirts he ironed himself at 6 in the morning, still driving a 12-year-old Ford with a heater that needed 10 minutes to become useful. His days were built out of small responsibilities that rarely looked impressive from the outside. He woke before Monica, packed his lunch in the quiet kitchen, checked fuel cost reports while coffee dripped into a chipped mug, and left a clean plate warming in the oven for her because she hated eating cold breakfast. At work, he solved problems other people did not notice until they became expensive. A delayed truck in Raleigh, a warehouse bottleneck outside Atlanta, a shipment rerouted because one number in a spreadsheet had been entered wrong. Damon saw patterns quickly. He could look at a messy schedule, a dozen drivers, for late vendors, and find the hidden pressure point in minutes. But when he came home, none of that sounded like ambition to Monica. It sounded ordinary. It sounded like another man doing just enough to stay employed. Their house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees and porch lights that came on automatically at dusk. Damon had repainted the shutters himself, repaired the loose step by the front door, and planted the small bed of boxwoods Monica had once circled in a magazine. He believed that love showed up in maintenance, in bills paid on time, in groceries remembered, in standing in the laundry room at midnight folding towels because tomorrow would be easier if it was done tonight. Monica had stopped seeing those things as care. Or maybe, Damon thought back then, she had never valued them the way he did. The signs had been small at first. A dinner invitation she forgot to mention until the last hour, then attended without him because she said it would be awkward if he arrived late. A comment at a neighbor's barbecue, light enough for everyone to laugh at, about how Damon was still working on his little software thing. The way she looked away when one of her friends asked what he did. Not cruel exactly. Not loud. Just a steady sanding down of his place beside her. At night, after Monica went upstairs, Damon sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and the house settling around him. The dishwasher hummed. The refrigerator clicked on. Outside, rain tapped softly against the back window. On the screen was the early version of what would become Whittaker Systems, although nobody called it that then. To everyone else, it was only an idea, a series of maps, routes, fuel estimates, loading delays, and predictive models that Damon believed could save small carriers from being crushed by inefficiency. He worked on it after 10-hour shifts because he could see the problem clearly. He could also see the solution. Monica saw only a man sitting in the dark with cold coffee and a dream that had not paid for anything yet. One Friday evening, Damon came home with takeout from the Thai place she liked and found her standing at the marble-patterned kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone with her coat still on. The food was warm in his hand. The house smelled faintly of her perfume and the lavender candle she burned when company was coming, though no one was there. "I thought we could eat together," he said. Monica did not look up right away. When she did, her expression was not angry. That almost made it worse. It was tired, polished, distant. "Damon, I cannot keep pretending this is enough." He set the paper bag on the counter slowly. Grease darkened one corner of it. "What does that mean?" She glanced toward his laptop bag near the door, then back at him. "It means I am tired of hearing about potential. I am tired of waiting for your life to turn into something." The words did not explode. They landed quietly, one after another, with the precision of things rehearsed in private. Damon stood there in his work shoes, rainwater drying on his sleeves, listening to the woman he had built a home with speak as if he were a delay she had tolerated too long. He did not argue. He looked at the wedding photo on the hallway wall, at their younger faces caught in summer light, at his own smile before he knew a person could be present in a marriage and still be slowly removed from it. Something in him shifted that night, but it did not break. Not yet. He only picked up the takeout bag, placed it in the refrigerator, and noticed, for the first time, a cream-colored envelope half hidden beneath Monica's purse on the counter, with the corner of a law firm's name showing in dark blue ink. Damon did not touch the envelope that night. He saw enough to know it was not junk mail, not a bill, not one of the glossy invitations Monica had started collecting from charity luncheons and networking dinners where he was rarely asked to come. The law firm name sat there in dark blue ink, half covered by the strap of her purse, and for a moment the kitchen seemed to narrow around it. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder. Rain moved in silver lines down the window over the sink. Monica had already gone upstairs, her heels clicking once on each step, leaving the takeout cooling behind the refrigerator door and Damon standing beneath the soft yellow kitchen light with a question he did not yet know how to ask. He stayed still because stillness had always been where he understood things best. In logistics, panic ruined the map. You had to look at the routes, the delays, the timing, the small pieces that did not fit. So he began doing that in his own home. Over the next few weeks, Damon watched the marriage change shape in ways that were quiet enough to deny but clear enough to feel. Monica no longer asked about his day. She no longer sat across from him at breakfast unless she needed something signed, paid, picked up, or repaired. Her calendar filled with events that sounded important but vague: leadership mixer, donor reception, private dinner, women in business roundtable. She bought a new black dress and left the tag in the bathroom trash, then told him it had been in the closet for months. The detail did not match. Damon did not confront her. He folded the receipt flat, noticed the boutique name printed at the top, and placed it back exactly where he found it. On Thursday nights, she came home with the faint scent of expensive perfume layered over wine and restaurant air, smiling at her phone as she walked through the door, then dimming the screen the moment she saw him in the hallway. "Long night?" he would ask. "You know how these things are," she would say, already turning away. But Damon did not know. He had not been invited to know. Once, at a dinner hosted by one of Monica's new friends, he understood how far the distance had grown. The house was large and bright, with marble floors, tall windows, and a driveway full of cars that cost more than the first home Damon's parents ever bought. Monica introduced him to a man in a navy blazer as if she were naming a piece of furniture. "This is Damon," she said. "He works in operations." The man nodded politely. Monica added, with a small laugh that made the other woman beside her smile, "And he has this little software project he refuses to let go of." Damon felt the room receive him differently after that. Not rudely. That would have been easier. They were kind in the way people are kind when they have already decided you do not matter. Someone asked him if the project was like an app. Someone else told him startups were cute until real bills came due. Damon answered calmly. He did not defend himself. He watched Monica accept a glass of champagne and drift toward the brighter side of the room, where people talked about vacation homes, board seats, and husbands who knew how to move money before the market shifted. On the drive home, the dashboard lights painted her face pale blue. She looked out the passenger window and said, "You could try harder in rooms like that." Damon kept both hands on the wheel. "I answered every question they asked me." "That is not what I mean." She sighed, not angry, just disappointed in a way that felt practiced. "You always sound so small." The words stayed in the truck after she stopped talking. Damon drove through the dark streets of Charlotte, past closed gas stations and quiet lawns, listening to the turn signal click at empty intersections. He thought of the maps on his laptop, the routes he had optimized, the fuel savings no one had believed yet, the problem he could see so clearly it sometimes kept him awake until 3 in the morning. He wanted to tell her that small things became large when built correctly. He wanted to remind her that every bridge began with measurements no one applauded. Instead, he said nothing. By then, silence had become the last place in the marriage where he still had control. That night, after Monica went upstairs, Damon opened his laptop at the kitchen table and found a new folder on the desktop labeled Carrier Pilot Projections. He had not created it. Inside was a blank document, untouched except for one line at the top, typed in his own careful format: "If they cannot see the value, build until they have no choice." Monday morning came with a kind of quiet that made every small sound feel intentional. Damon woke at 5:42, 6 minutes before his alarm, and lay still beneath the gray wash of dawn coming through the blinds. The house was silent except for the low breath of the heating system and the distant roll of a garbage truck moving down the block. For one brief moment, before memory arranged itself, it felt like any other morning. Then he turned his head and saw Monica's side of the bed already made, the pillow smooth, the blanket pulled tight, as if she had not slept there at all. He showered, shaved, and dressed in the same navy shirt he wore on most Mondays, moving through the routine with the calm precision that had carried him through years of disappointment. In the kitchen, the coffee maker clicked and sputtered. The old wall clock above the pantry marked each second too loudly. Damon packed his lunch, placed Monica's favorite mug beside the machine out of habit, then stopped when he realized she had not used it in weeks. Her travel cup was gone. Her keys were not on the hook by the garage door. On the counter, beneath the soft light over the sink, sat a manila envelope. It was centered exactly in the space where he usually set the mail. No note. No coffee ring. No hesitation visible anywhere around it. Just the envelope, thick and pale, with his full legal name typed across the front. Damon stood across from it for several seconds. Something felt wrong, but not sudden. It felt like the final number in a calculation he had been refusing to finish. He wiped one hand on a dish towel, though his palm was not wet, and lifted the envelope by one corner. The paper was heavier than it needed to be. Expensive. Formal. The kind of paper people used when they wanted Payne to look organized. He opened it cleanly and pulled out the documents inside. The first page told him what the house had been whispering for months. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His eyes moved line by line without rushing. Monica's name. His name. The address of the home he had repaired, painted, paid for, and tried to make peaceful. The date. The law firm. The requested division of property. Each sentence was calm, professional, bloodless. That was what made it feel colder. Damon did not sit down. He stood at the kitchen counter where he had chopped vegetables for Sunday dinners, reviewed bills, signed birthday cards for Monica's nieces, and once spread out blueprints for the small deck she had wanted in the backyard. Now the same counter held the legal architecture of his removal. A sound came from the hallway. He looked up. Monica stood near the stairs in a camel-colored coat, her hair smooth, her purse already over her shoulder. She looked prepared in a way that told him this morning was not new to her. It was only new to him. "I had the papers drawn up," she said. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, as if gentleness could soften what she had placed in front of him. Damon looked down at the pages, then back at her. When? She adjusted the strap of her purse. "A while ago." The answer was too small for the size of the moment. He noticed that first. Not the pain. Not the anger pressing somewhere behind his ribs. The mismatch. A while ago meant consultations. Drafts. Decisions made while she still accepted coffee from him in the morning and asked him to fix the loose drawer in the bathroom. A while ago meant she had been living ahead of him while he was still trying to stand beside her. "Monica," he said quietly, "how long?" For the first time, her eyes moved away. Only for a second, but Damon saw it. "Long enough to know this is what I need." There it was again. Need. Not want. Not choose. A word designed to make abandonment sound like survival. She walked to the counter and turned one page with a manicured finger. "My attorney says it should be simple if you do not make it difficult. The house stays with me for now. The truck is yours. The accounts will be reviewed. I think that is fair." Damon heard the coffee maker hiss behind him, finishing its cycle for two people who were no longer having breakfast together. He looked at the paragraph she had touched. Temporary exclusive use of residence. Spousal support reserved. Business interests to be disclosed. His small software project was not named. It was buried under a category so broad it could swallow anything if a person tried hard enough. He stayed silent. Monica mistook it for defeat. He could see that in the slight lift of her chin, the breath she released, the way her shoulders settled as if the hardest part was already over. "I waited long enough for you to become somebody," she said, not loudly, not cruelly enough to sound theatrical, but plainly, which made it worse. "I cannot keep building my life around potential." Damon folded the first page back into place. His wedding ring felt strangely heavy on his hand. He remembered the dinner party, the envelope under her purse, the receipts that did not match, the closed doors, the way she had begun introducing him as if he were a footnote to her future. None of it was proof of anything yet. But it was pattern. And Damon trusted patterns. Monica moved toward the garage door, already leaving the conversation she had started. "Bradley's office will contact you," she said. "Please do not turn this into a fight." The door opened, letting in a blade of cold morning air and the smell of wet pavement. Then it closed behind her. Damon remained in the kitchen, the divorce papers spread beneath his hands, the coffee cooling beside him, and the house suddenly larger than it had ever felt. He did not tear the documents. He did not call her back. He only turned to the last page, where Monica's signature waited in blue ink above the date. It had been signed 29 days earlier. Damon read the signature 3 times, not because he doubted what it meant, but because the date changed everything. 29 days. For 29 days, Monica had moved through their house knowing a lawyer had already reduced their marriage to numbered paragraphs. She had eaten the meals he cooked, left dry cleaning slips on the counter, asked him to replace the filter in the hallway vent, and slept under the same roof while the papers waited somewhere outside his knowledge. That was the part that made the kitchen feel colder than the morning air. Not the divorce itself. The preparation. Damon placed the documents back on the counter and made himself breathe slowly. In freight operations, the first report was never the whole problem. A late truck was rarely just a late truck. There was always a chain behind it: weather, dispatch, fuel, labor, timing, one wrong assumption made earlier and repeated until it became expensive. He looked at the papers again and understood that his marriage had become the same kind of system failure. He needed the chain. He needed the dates. He needed the numbers. The coffee had gone bitter by the time he opened his laptop. The banking page loaded with its usual blue and white calm, as if nothing in the world had shifted. Damon entered the password, waited for the 2-step verification code, and clicked into the joint checking account they had used for mortgage payments, groceries, utilities, repairs, and every ordinary rhythm of a shared life. At first, the balance looked wrong. Not empty. That would have been too obvious. Just thinner than it should have been, shaved down in a way that did not announce itself until a person knew what the account usually carried. He leaned closer. There were transfers he did not recognize. $2,400. $1,800. $3,000 even. Each one spaced apart by enough days to look like expenses instead of movement. Each one labeled with descriptions that sounded harmless: personal allocation, reimbursement, household adjustment. The detail did not match. Damon opened the last 90 days and downloaded the statements without touching anything else. He did not know yet what those transfers meant, and he did not let himself decide too early. Assumptions were dangerous. Patterns were useful. He created a folder on his desktop and named it with the date, nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. Then he saved the first file. After that, he checked the savings account. The vacation fund was gone. Not reduced. Gone. The account he had fed slowly over years, $50 here, $200 there, the account Monica once said would take them to Santa Barbara or maybe Italy if they were patient, had been closed 12 days earlier. Damon stared at the screen as the refrigerator hummed behind him. He remembered Monica laughing over travel photos at the kitchen table, saying she wanted somewhere with blue water and white sheets, somewhere that did not feel like real life. He had believed Patience could give her that someday. Now all that remained was a closure confirmation and a line item that moved the money somewhere he could not see. He printed the statements from the small wireless printer in the corner of the home office. The machine clicked and pulled paper with a tired mechanical sound. Page after page slid into the tray. Damon gathered them carefully, aligning the edges with both hands. His phone buzzed once on the desk. A message from Monica. Bradley says you should expect a call today. Please be reasonable. Damon read it twice. The words were clean, almost polite. Please be reasonable, from the woman who had signed papers 29 days ago and emptied an account 12 days ago. He set the phone face down. By noon, reason had become a list. The mortgage paperwork. Vehicle titles. Insurance policies. Investment accounts. Tax records from the file cabinet in the guest room. Damon moved through the house quietly, opening drawers, checking folders, noticing what was missing by the shape of the spaces left behind. The folder for the house deed was not where it had always been. The spare key to the truck Monica drove was gone from the ceramic bowl near the door. In the closet, one of his 2 suitcases had already been pulled from the shelf and placed upright behind a row of coats, as if someone had expected him to need it soon. That was when Damon stopped. He stood in the hallway, looking at the suitcase handle visible in the shadows, and felt the first clear edge of the truth. Monica had not only decided to leave. She had prepared the house for his removal before he even knew he was being removed. Outside, a car door closed somewhere down the street. Inside, the printer gave one last soft beep from the office. Damon walked back to the kitchen, placed the bank statements beside the divorce papers, and turned to the page about temporary residence again. The language was careful. The plan was not. She was not asking him to leave yet. She had already arranged for the question to sound settled when it came. Damon did not leave the house that day. He moved through it with the documents stacked in a neat folder under his arm, not because he needed to carry them from room to room, but because setting them down felt too much like surrendering them to the house that had already begun pushing him out. By late afternoon, the clouds had lowered over Charlotte and the windows had turned gray. The kitchen light reflected off the counter where the divorce papers had first appeared that morning, and every familiar object seemed to have changed its meaning. The wedding photo in the hallway was still there. The blue bowl for keys was still by the door. The throw blanket Monica had chosen 2 winters earlier still rested over the back of the sofa, folded in the careful way Damon always folded it after she left it on the floor. Nothing looked destroyed. That was what made it feel unreal. A life could be dismantled without breaking a single visible thing. At 4:36, Monica returned with Bradley Pierce. Damon heard the garage door rise, then the quiet murmur of two voices before the interior door opened. He was standing at the dining room table, sorting account statements by date. Monica stepped in first, still wearing the camel-colored coat from the morning, though the rain had darkened the shoulders. Bradley followed with a leather folder pressed flat against his chest. He was younger than Damon expected, perhaps late 30s, with the polished calm of a man who had practiced looking reasonable in expensive mirrors. Damon recognized the shoes before he studied the face, glossy black, narrow, untouched by weather. Monica looked at the papers on the dining table and stopped. "What are you doing?" Damon slid one statement into place. "Understanding the situation." Bradley gave a small professional smile. "Mr. Whitaker, I think it would be better if we all kept this simple." Damon looked at him then. Not sharply. Just fully. Simple for whom? The smile did not disappear, but it settled. Monica crossed her arms, not tightly, not nervously, more like a person reminding herself where the power in the room was supposed to be. "Damon, please do not turn this into one of your analysis projects." That sentence touched something old in him. Not because it was cruel, but because it was familiar. The same dismissal, dressed in a different outfit. Analysis project. Little software thing. Potential. Small. He had heard versions of it for years, each one placed gently enough that he had sometimes questioned whether it was disrespect or just impatience. Now he no longer had to wonder. Bradley opened his folder and placed a second set of documents on the dining table, closer to Damon's side than Monica's. "This is a proposed temporary arrangement. Mrs. Whitaker will remain in the residence while the case proceeds. You will have access to personal belongings and one vehicle. Financial disclosures will be handled through counsel." Damon saw the wording before Bradley finished speaking. Temporary occupancy. Separate living arrangement. Preliminary asset schedule. His eyes moved across the pages calmly, but his body felt colder with every line. They had already written him outside the walls. "I have not agreed to leave," Damon said. Monica exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Damon, be realistic." He looked at her. Outside, rain ticked against the windows. Somewhere in the laundry room, the dryer buzzed once and went silent, an ordinary sound from an ordinary machine inside a marriage that was no longer ordinary at all. "Realistic," he repeated. Monica glanced at Bradley, then back at Damon, and her face changed in a small way. The softness left. The practiced patience thinned. For a second, Damon saw the woman from the dinner party, the woman who needed the room to know she had outgrown him. "Yes," she said. "Realistic. The house is more useful to me. The accounts need to be handled properly. And honestly, you can keep your business idea. It is worth nothing anyway." The room went still around the words. Damon did not move. He did not blink quickly or reach for the edge of the table. He only looked at her, and in that quiet second, something inside him stopped trying to explain itself. That was the sentence he would remember. Not because it was the worst thing she had said, but because it was the clearest. It told him exactly what she thought she was leaving behind. It told him why she had signed so easily, why she had planned so cleanly, why she believed the future could be divided before it arrived. Bradley shifted his weight, perhaps sensing the temperature of the room change, but Damon's eyes stayed on Monica. "Put that in writing," Damon said. Monica frowned. "What?" "That you make no claim to it. The business idea. The software. Anything that comes from it." For the first time that day, she looked almost amused. "Fine." Bradley lifted one hand slightly. "We can address intellectual property in the settlement language." Damon nodded once. "Good." He gathered the bank statements, aligned the corners, and placed them into his folder with the same care he used when closing a file at work. Monica watched him, waiting for anger that did not come. Damon gave her none. He only understood, with absolute quiet, that she had just handed him the one thing she did not believe had value. The first night after Damon moved out, he slept in a room behind a closed freight office that smelled like cardboard, floor cleaner, and old coffee. It was not an apartment. It was not meant for living. The space had one narrow window facing the back of the industrial lot, a metal desk with scratches across the top, a folding chair, and a brown sofa left behind by a dispatcher who had retired 2 years earlier. Damon placed his 2 suitcases against the wall, set his laptop on the desk, and stood there for a long moment while trucks moved somewhere beyond the loading bays, their reverse alarms faint and distant in the dark. The divorce agreement was not final yet, but the shape of his life had already changed. The house was gone from his nights. The kitchen was gone from his mornings. Monica's voice was gone from the rooms he had maintained so carefully. What remained was quieter and less forgiving, a blank screen, a stack of copied statements, and the business idea she had called worthless. Damon did not cry. Not because he felt nothing, but because the feeling was too large to come out in a simple way. He opened his laptop instead. The cracked corner of the screen glowed blue against the office walls. A spreadsheet appeared first, then the routing model, then the messy early code he had built in pieces after work for almost 2 years. He looked at it differently now. Before, it had been hope. That night, it became a place to put every insult he would never answer out loud. For the next month, Damon lived between his job, the freight office, and the small gym down the street where a monthly membership gave him a shower at 6 in the morning. He kept his clothes pressed, his face shaved, his voice steady. At work, nobody knew the full story. They knew he had become quieter. They knew he stayed late. They knew he took lunch at his desk and answered calls with a level calm that made even angry vendors lower their voices. After hours, when the last forklift stopped beeping and the warehouse lights clicked off row by row, Damon built. He fed real delivery data into the model. He tested fuel costs against traffic patterns. He mapped warehouse delays, driver hours, seasonal freight spikes, and the hidden expense of empty miles. Most people thought trucking was about movement. Damon knew it was about waste. Waste in minutes. Waste in routes. Waste in half-loaded trailers crossing state lines while small carriers bled money and called it normal. He could see the leak no one had named yet. Some nights, exhaustion folded over him so heavily that the letters on the screen blurred. He would stand, walk to the vending machine near the break room, buy a bottle of water and a pack of crackers, then return to the desk. The office heater rattled above him. Rain tapped the window. His phone stayed mostly silent except for legal emails, bank alerts, and occasional messages from people who did not know what to say. Monica sent practical notes through Bradley Pierce now. Dates. Requests. Instructions. Damon answered through counsel when counsel became necessary, and when it did not, he said nothing. Silence had become a door he could close. In the mornings, he reviewed the divorce language before work, especially the paragraph Bradley had added after Monica dismissed the company idea at the dining room table. Damon read it until he knew every comma. Monica waived any present or future claim to software concepts, business models, intellectual property, corporate entities, licensing agreements, customer relationships, derivative products, or income generated from any venture developed independently by Damon Whitaker after the date of separation. Bradley had written it to make the settlement clean. Monica had agreed because she believed there would be nothing to claim. Damon did not smile when he read it. He only saved another copy. Building in silence was not dramatic. It was lonely. It was sending 27 cold emails and receiving 26 polite rejections. It was a carrier in Greensboro telling him the idea sounded interesting but unproven. It was a dispatcher in Columbia saying small companies did not have money for experiments. It was Damon sitting in his parked truck outside a convenience store at midnight, recording notes into his phone because a solution had finally clicked while he was too tired to type. Then, one Tuesday evening, after a day of rain and delayed shipments across 3 states, his inbox refreshed. A small carrier outside Spartanburg had replied. 6 trucks. Family-owned. Thin margins. Willing to test the model for 30 days if Damon could show them where the money was leaking. Damon read the message once. Then again. The office around him was silent except for the low hum of the ceiling light. For the first time since the papers appeared on the kitchen counter, the future did not feel like something being taken from him. It felt like something opening, very quietly, from the inside. The Spartanburg test began on a Monday morning with 6 trucks, 2 dispatchers, and a handwritten list of problems taped beside a warehouse phone. Damon arrived before sunrise in his old Ford, wearing a pressed white shirt and carrying his laptop in the same worn leather bag Monica used to say made him look like he was still waiting for life to start. The carrier's office sat behind a gravel lot off Interstate 85, with faded siding, a coffee machine that smelled burnt before 7, and a wall calendar marked with delivery windows in red ink. Nothing about it looked like the beginning of something large. That was why Damon trusted it. Real value usually entered quietly. The owner, a broad-shouldered man named Carl Bennett, walked Damon through the operation with the tired honesty of someone who had been keeping a family business alive by willpower and overdraft protection. Fuel costs were up. Drivers were losing hours at loading docks. Return trips were too often half-empty. Customers wanted faster service without paying for the time it actually took. Damon listened more than he spoke. He watched the dispatch board. He studied the delivery sheets. He asked about routes, wait times, repair schedules, unpaid detention, and which customers always seemed simple until the invoice told the truth. By noon, he had found the first leak. By Wednesday, he had found 4 more. By the end of the first week, Carl stood beside Damon's laptop, staring at a route model that showed 3 unnecessary empty runs, 2 bad pickup sequences, and a recurring warehouse delay that had been costing the company almost $1,100 a week. "You are telling me this was sitting right in front of us?" Carl asked. Damon looked at the screen, not the man. Most expensive problems usually are. The 30-day test became 45 because Carl did not want to stop it. Damon's model cut fuel waste, reduced overtime, and gave the dispatchers a way to see trouble before it arrived. The savings were not magical. They were measurable. That mattered more. At the end of the pilot, Carl printed the report himself and slid it across a folding table in the break room. $28,400 saved in 6 weeks. Damon read the number with both hands resting flat on the table. He did not celebrate. Not outwardly. He only felt the room steady around him, as if the floor had finally agreed to hold. "Can you do this for my cousin's outfit in Knoxville?" Carl asked. "He has 12 trucks." Damon looked up. "Yes." That was the first door. Then came the second. Then the third. Word moved through small carriers faster than advertising ever could. Men and women who did not trust software trusted other owners who had survived the same margins. Damon kept his day job for as long as he could, building before dawn, building after dark, building through weekends with laundry drying over the office chair and invoices stacked beside takeout containers. He filed the company papers from a public library computer one Saturday afternoon because the printer at the freight office jammed and he did not want to wait until Monday. Whitaker Systems became a legal entity with a confirmation email, a state filing number, and no applause. Damon stared at the screen while children whispered near the picture books and an older man read the newspaper 2 tables away. It was official, but it was still only a seed. He knew better than to confuse paperwork with harvest. Months passed. The old Ford gained another crack in the windshield. The office sofa ruined his back. His first website looked plain, almost embarrassingly plain, but the numbers behind it were clean. A carrier in Richmond saved enough to hire 2 drivers. A refrigerated freight company outside Nashville reduced missed delivery penalties by 15%. A warehouse network in Georgia asked for a yearly license instead of a trial. Damon wrote every result down. Not as proof for Monica. Not anymore. As proof for the market. The first investor call came after a customer forwarded one of his reports to a former college roommate who now worked in private equity. Damon took the call from his truck during his lunch break, parked beneath a shade tree behind the freight yard. The man on the phone used words like scalable, defensible, acquisition pathway. Damon listened politely, watching a forklift move pallets through an open bay door. 3 years earlier, Monica had looked at the same idea and seen nothing. Now strangers with money were asking how much of it he was willing to sell. He did not answer quickly. He had learned what happened when people valued a thing only after someone else named the price. By the time Whitaker Systems moved into its first real office, Damon had 12 employees, 41 clients, and a contract pipeline he reviewed every night before bed. The office was small, with borrowed chairs and windows that faced a parking deck, but on the first morning, Damon arrived early, placed his old cracked laptop on the empty conference table, and stood beside it for a long time. The screen no longer closed properly. The battery barely held a charge. But it had carried the first version of everything. He left it there during the first team meeting. No explanation. Just a reminder. 2 years later, when the valuation report arrived with $300 million printed on page 7, Damon read it alone in a quiet room overlooking the city. He heard the muted traffic below, the soft hum of the heating system, the same kind of silence that had surrounded him in the freight office. He thought he would feel triumph. Instead, he felt clarity. The number was not revenge. The number was evidence. And somewhere beyond that glass, in a life that had once called him small, someone was about to see it. Monica saw Damon's name on a Thursday afternoon while sitting beneath soft gold lighting in a salon on the east side of Charlotte, one hand resting under a dryer, the other scrolling through her phone with the bored rhythm of a woman trying not to look worried. Damon did not see that moment. He only learned about it later through the sequence of calls, emails, and sudden movements that followed, but he could imagine the shape of it because the pattern was familiar. A headline had gone live that morning after the valuation closed. Whitaker Systems, the company no one had believed in when it lived on his cracked laptop, had crossed a number large enough to make strangers repeat it out loud. By noon, his phone had become a small storm. Investors. Reporters. Former colleagues. People who had not answered his emails in the early days now wrote as if they had always known. Damon read the messages from his office without letting any of them pull him too far from the work in front of him. He had payroll approvals to review. A customer renewal to sign. A driver shortage analysis from the Nashville account that needed a decision before 5 o'clock. Numbers did not care about applause. Systems still had to run. Still, around 2:15, his assistant Alicia stepped into his doorway holding her tablet against her chest. "You may want to see this," she said. Damon looked up from the contract. "What is it?" She hesitated. That pause again. Damon noticed it before he noticed her expression. "Your ex-wife called the main line." The room quieted in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Damon set his pen down. "What did she say?" She asked if the article was accurate. Alicia's face remained professional, but her eyes carried the discomfort of someone who knew enough not to know too much. Then she asked who handles your legal affairs. Damon leaned back slowly. Beyond the glass wall of his office, his employees moved through the afternoon with coffee cups, laptops, and quiet urgency. On the street far below, traffic crawled between buildings. Everything continued. That was the strange thing about Old Payne. The world never stopped for it. "Did you give her anything?" he asked. "No, sir. I told her all legal inquiries need to be submitted in writing." Damon nodded once. "Good." He returned to the contract, but the words on the page had shifted. Monica had not called to congratulate him. That would have surprised him less than it should have. She had called to verify. To locate the gate. To find the handle on the door. Something felt wrong, but not unexpected. By the end of the day, there were 2 more calls. One from an unknown number that disconnected when Alicia asked for a name. Another from a woman who said she was calling on behalf of Monica Whittaker and wanted to confirm whether Damon still maintained offices in Charlotte. Damon did not react to either message. He saved them. He wrote down the times. He added them to a folder with the same calm he had used years earlier when he sorted bank statements beside divorce papers. The next morning, his private line rang at 7:48. Few people had that number. Damon was in the conference room alone, reviewing a quarterly revenue model while the sun came through the tall windows in pale strips across the oak table. He looked at the screen. Monica. For a while, he let it ring. Not out of cruelty. Out of measurement. The sound filled the room, stopped, then began again less than a minute later. He answered on the second call. Monica. There was a brief silence, just long enough for him to hear the faint background noise on her side, traffic, maybe, or a coffee shop, glass and voices and movement. Damon, she said, and her voice carried a tone he had not heard in years. Careful warmth. Polished softness. The kind of voice people used when they wanted the past to appear less sharp than it was. I saw the news. He said nothing. She continued. That is incredible. Really. I always knew you were smart. Damon looked at the revenue model in front of him, at the clean columns and hard numbers, and remembered her standing in their dining room saying his idea was worth nothing. He remembered Bradley Pierce's glossy shoes on their floor. He remembered the suitcase waiting behind Coates before he had agreed to leave. What do you need, Monica? He asked. The softness thinned. Not enough for someone else to notice, maybe, but Damon noticed. I was hoping we could talk. Privately. There are things from that time that maybe we both handled badly. That was the first rewrite. Not apology. Not accountability. A shared fog placed over a specific wound. Damon turned one page of the report, though he was no longer reading it. Send whatever you need to say through counsel. Her silence lasted longer this time. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone from the edges. You do not have to be like that. Damon looked out over the city, the same city he had driven through with 2 suitcases in the back of an old truck. I think I do, he said. He ended the call before anger could enter the room. 30 minutes later, Alicia brought in a courier envelope addressed to Damon Whittaker, Chief Executive Officer. The return address belonged to Bradley Pierce's firm. Damon took it without opening it right away. He already understood that Monica had seen the number. What he did not know yet was how quickly she had decided the past could be edited to reach it. Damon waited until the conference room door closed before he opened Bradley Pierce's envelope. He did not open it in front of Alicia, and he did not open it at his desk where glass walls made every movement visible. He took it into the smaller internal conference room, the one without city views, the one his team used for vendor disputes and hard conversations. The space had an oak table, 6 black chairs, a muted screen on the wall, and a faint smell of dry erase markers from a meeting that had ended an hour earlier. It was not dramatic. That suited him. Most important things in Damon's life had first revealed themselves in quiet rooms. He slid a finger under the seal and removed the papers slowly. The first page carried Bradley's name across the top, sharp and centered, as if the letterhead itself wanted authority. Damon read the opening paragraph once. Then again. By the 3rd sentence, he understood what Monica was trying to do. She was not asking for a conversation anymore. She was building a story. According to the letter, Monica had provided substantial emotional and domestic support during the conceptual formation of Damon's business. She had endured financial instability while Damon developed the early model. She had contributed to the household environment that allowed the venture to mature. The words were careful. Clean. Almost elegant. They also bent the past until it no longer resembled anything Damon had lived. He set the first page flat on the table and kept reading. Bradley claimed that because the initial concept existed during the marriage, Monica had a good faith basis to seek equitable review of any value derived from it. Damon's eyes stopped on that phrase. Good faith basis. He remembered the dining room, the rain on the windows, Monica's camel-colored coat, Bradley's polished shoes, and the way she had said the idea was worth nothing anyway. That memory had not faded at the edges. It remained exact, preserved by the kind of silence that follows a sentence a person can never take back. The letter continued for 4 pages. It requested financial disclosures, company formation documents, capitalization history, investor agreements, licensing contracts, valuation materials, and communications related to the development of Whittaker Systems. It suggested mediation before litigation. It warned against asset transfers. It mentioned reputational concerns in language soft enough to pretend it was not pressure. Damon read every word without moving except to turn the pages. Outside the conference room, the office carried on. A printer started somewhere near accounting. Someone laughed briefly near the break area. A phone rang twice and stopped. His company was alive around him, built by years Monica had not seen, years she had chosen not to see. Now the same years were being pulled backward, stitched into a version where her absence became sacrifice and her contempt became contribution. He did not feel shocked. Shock belonged to people who still believed fairness arrived naturally. Damon had learned better. He opened his laptop and pulled up the old divorce folder he had archived in 3 separate places. The file names were plain: settlement final, executed waiver, financial exhibits, separation date confirmation. Nothing emotional. Nothing a stranger would notice. He clicked the settlement agreement and scrolled to the paragraph Bradley himself had drafted. Monica waived any present or future claim to software concepts, business models, intellectual property, corporate entities, licensing agreements, customer relationships, derivative products, or income generated from any venture developed independently by Damon Whittaker after the date of separation. Damon read the sentence slowly. Then he opened the scanned signature page. Monica's name sat there in blue ink, clean and confident, beneath language she had accepted because she believed it protected her from being tied to failure. The detail did not match Bradley's new letter. Not even close. Damon saved a copy of the demand letter into the same folder and added the date. He did not write a response. Not yet. First, he needed to understand how far she planned to push the lie. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Damon, this is Monica. I hope we can be adults about this before lawyers make it ugly. He looked at the message for a long moment. Then another bubble appeared. I was there when you started. Do not pretend I was not part of your journey. Damon placed the phone face down. He remembered the freight office sofa. The gym showers. The vending machine crackers. The first cold emails. The first rejection. The first customer. The first night the future opened from the inside. Monica had not been there for any of it. But now, with $300 million attached to the story, she was trying to move herself into every empty space she had left behind. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, but Damon was in the conference room at 8:40. He chose the larger room on the 52nd floor, not because he wanted to impress Monica, but because it had one thing he needed: glass on 3 sides and a long clear view of the city beneath them. People behaved differently when they could see how high they had climbed. The oak table had been polished before sunrise. Water glasses sat evenly spaced beside legal pads no one had written on yet. A muted screen glowed at the far wall with no presentation loaded, just the company logo in quiet gray letters. Damon stood near the windows with his hands in his pockets, watching morning traffic move through downtown Charlotte in slow silver lines. He was not thinking about revenge. Not the way people imagined it. There was no heat in him, no fantasy of shouting, no need to make Monica feel small in the way she had once made him feel small. He had learned something in the years after the divorce. Control was not volume. Control was preparation. On the table in front of him sat only one folder, closed. Denise Caldwell had told him to bring nothing else into the room until she arrived. Denise was precise that way. She had represented him quietly for 2 years, first as a business attorney, then as the person who reviewed every clause, every investor agreement, every old settlement page that might one day matter. She had a voice that never needed to rise, and a habit of letting other people talk until they built the walls around themselves. Damon respected that. He had built his company on the same principle. Let the data speak after the assumptions exposed themselves. At 9:56, Alicia's voice came through the room phone. Mr. Whitaker, Mrs. Whitaker and Mr. Pierce have arrived. Damon looked at the glass reflection of himself, adjusted nothing, and said, "Send them up." 4 minutes later, the elevator doors opened at the end of the private corridor. Damon heard Monica before he saw her, not her words, but the clean rhythm of her heels on polished floor. It was a sound from another life, sharpened by distance. She entered with Bradley Pierce beside her, wearing a cream suit, a gold watch, and the careful expression of someone who had decided confidence was the same thing as leverage. Bradley carried the same leather folder Damon had seen on the lobby camera. Behind them walked a younger man Damon did not recognize, holding a slim gray file against his side. Damon noticed him immediately. The second man did not introduce himself. Neither did Monica. Her eyes moved across the room first, over the windows, the table, the skyline, the logo on the screen. Damon watched her take in the evidence of what she had not believed in. She smiled only after she finished looking. "Damon," she said. "This is quite a place." "Monica." He gestured toward the chairs. "Bradley." Bradley gave a professional nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Damon sat after they did. That mattered. He let them settle first. He let Monica place her purse on the table. He let Bradley open his folder. He let the younger man sit slightly behind them with his gray file unopened on his lap. Nothing in Damon's face asked who he was. Asking too soon gave away what you did not know. Monica folded her hands in front of her. The gold watch caught the light. "I hoped we could avoid making this hostile," she said. Damon looked at her for a moment. He remembered her in the dining room, telling him to be realistic. He remembered the suitcase behind the coats. He remembered the settlement language she had signed because she wanted a clean exit from a man she thought would stay ordinary. "Then say what you came to say," he said. Bradley cleared his throat and slid a packet across the table. "Our position is straightforward. The concept that became Whitaker Systems originated during the marriage. Mrs. Whitaker maintained the household during that period, endured financial uncertainty, and provided emotional support while you developed the early framework. We believe she is entitled to a negotiated interest, or at minimum, a substantial settlement reflecting her contribution." Damon did not touch the packet. He looked at it as if it were an object left behind by someone careless. "What amount are you proposing?" Bradley glanced at Monica, then back at Damon. "We are prepared to begin discussions at 30%. The room became very quiet. Even the heating system seemed to soften. Damon looked at Monica then, not Bradley. She held his gaze with the faint lift of her chin he knew too well. She thought the number would frighten him. She thought the company valuation had made him vulnerable. She thought he would pay for peace because she had once watched him avoid conflict in their home. 30%, Damon repeated. Monica leaned forward slightly. "I was there before anyone else believed in you." Damon felt the sentence pass through him without landing. There had been a time when those words might have cut him open. Now they only confirmed the shape of the trap she had willingly stepped into. He stayed silent long enough for Bradley to mistake it for concern. The attorney continued, voice smoother now. "A public dispute would not benefit anyone. Your board, your investors, your clients. These matters can become distracting. Damon turned his eyes to the closed conference room door. On the other side, he knew Denise Caldwell was already in the building. He had received her text 3 minutes earlier. Damon placed both hands flat on the table and finally pulled Bradley's packet toward him, not to read it, only to align its edges with the grain of the wood. "Before we discuss numbers," he said quietly, "there is someone you need to meet." The conference room door opened with the soft click of expensive hardware, and Denise Caldwell stepped in as if the meeting had been waiting for her all along. Damon watched Monica's face first. Not because he expected fear, but because first reactions often told the truth before people remembered to perform. Monica's eyes moved from Denise's charcoal suit to the slim black folder in her hand, then back to Damon. Bradley turned in his chair, his expression tightening by a fraction. The younger man behind him looked down at his gray file as if it had suddenly become heavier. Denise did not rush. She crossed the polished floor with measured steps, placed her folder beside Damon's, and introduced herself in a voice calm enough to lower the temperature of the room. "Denise Caldwell, counsel for Mr. Whitaker and Whitaker Systems." Bradley straightened. "We were not informed you would be joining." Denise looked at him, not unkindly. "You sent a demand letter to my client's company. You should have assumed counsel would attend." Damon remained still. The city moved beyond the windows, bright and distant, while everything that mattered narrowed to the oak table between them. Denise opened her folder and removed a single document, not a stack, not a performance, just one clean copy of the settlement agreement from 3 years earlier. Damon recognized the page before she turned it toward Bradley. He had read it so many times the language felt carved into the back of his mind. "Before anyone discusses 30%, Denise said, we should begin with the agreement your client executed voluntarily on the date of separation." Monica's lips parted slightly. "That agreement was about the divorce." "Correct," Denise said. "And within that divorce agreement, your client specifically waived any present or future claim to software concepts, business models, intellectual property, corporate entities, licensing agreements, customer relationships, derivative products, or income generated from any venture developed independently by Damon Whitaker after separation." She slid the page across the table. "The language is unusually comprehensive. Mr. Pierce drafted it." The silence that followed was different from the one before. This one had weight. Damon watched Bradley pick up the page. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slower. He turned to the signature line. Monica's blue ink sat at the bottom like a door she had closed on herself. Bradley did not speak right away. Monica looked at him, waiting for the expression that would restore her confidence. It did not come. "That clause was intended to clarify limited marital exposure," Bradley said carefully. Denise nodded once. "It did." Damon looked at Monica then. She was no longer leaning forward. The gold watch on her wrist had stopped catching the light because her hand had moved under the table. He remembered that hand sliding papers across their kitchen counter. He remembered how easy the pen had looked in it. Monica cleared her throat. "I signed what you told me to sign at the time, Bradley." Bradley's jaw moved slightly. Damon caught it. A fracture, small but visible. Denise did not chase it. She reached back into the folder and removed a second set of papers. "There is another matter." Damon had seen those papers only once before, in Denise's office, after Raymond Ellis had completed his review. He had not enjoyed reading them. There was no pleasure in discovering how carefully someone had emptied pieces of a life while still asking you to carry groceries in from the car. Denise placed the bank statements on the table in chronological order. "If your client intends to reopen financial issues from the marriage, we are prepared to address all financial issues from the marriage." Bradley's eyes flicked to the first statement. Damon watched the color of the conversation change. Transfers. Personal allocation. Household adjustment. Reimbursement. Each label Monica had once trusted to disappear inside ordinary language now sat under a highlighter line, dated and numbered. Denise continued, her voice even. In the 90 days before service of the divorce petition, funds were removed from joint accounts and transferred into accounts not disclosed in the sworn financial statement. The vacation savings account was closed 12 days before Mr. Whitaker was served. Several asset disclosures appear incomplete. Monica looked directly at Damon for the first time since Denise entered. Not with softness. Not with apology. With disbelief that he had kept the records. Damon did not look away. He had not kept them for revenge. He had kept them because the numbers had asked to be remembered. Bradley set the first statement down very slowly. We would need to review the basis for those assertions. Of course, Denise said. That is why Mr. Whitaker has not filed anything yet. He preferred to give your client the opportunity to withdraw her demand before this becomes a court record. The younger man behind Bradley shifted in his chair, the gray folder still closed on his lap. Damon noticed Monica glance at it, then away. Something was inside it, something they had brought expecting to use against him. But the timing had changed. The room had changed. The leverage had changed. Damon finally spoke, quietly enough that everyone had to listen. You came here asking for part of what you said had no value. Monica swallowed, but said nothing. Damon looked at the old settlement page, then at the highlighted statements, then back to the woman who had once believed leaving him meant leaving nothing behind. Denise, he said, show them the separation date exhibit. Denise opened the final tab in her folder. Bradley's eyes moved toward it. Monica's hand came back onto the table, and for the first time, Damon saw it tremble. Damon did not look at Monica's trembling hand for long. He had learned years earlier that dignity was not something you proved by staring at someone while they fell apart. Denise placed the separation date exhibit on the table, turning it so Bradley could read it first. It was simple, almost disappointingly simple for a document that carried so much weight. The date Monica had signed the agreement. The date Damon had moved out. The date Whitaker Systems had been registered as a company. The date of the first customer contract. Every point laid out in clean black text, supported by state filings, email confirmations, bank records, and time-stamped agreements. Damon watched Bradley's eyes move from one date to the next. He did not need to explain the pattern. The pattern explained itself. The company had been born after the separation. The first revenue had arrived after the separation. The licenses, the customer relationships, the investors, the valuation, every piece of what Monica now wanted had grown in the years she had chosen not to be there. Bradley closed his mouth once, then opened it again, but no argument came out. Denise gave him time. That was her way. She let silence do the work people tried to avoid. Monica reached for her water glass and missed it by half an inch before correcting herself. The glass made a small sound against the table. Damon, she said, and this time his name sounded different. Not polished. Not strategic. Smaller. He looked at her because she had said it, not because he owed her rescue. I did not know it would become this. That was the closest she had come to the truth all morning. Damon felt the sentence settle in him without heat. She had not known. That was exactly the point. She had not known because she had never looked closely enough. She had measured his future by the size of his paycheck, his car, his old laptop, his silence. She had mistaken the absence of display for the absence of value. No, Damon said quietly. You did not. Monica's eyes moved to the highlighted bank statements, then to the old waiver, then to Bradley. Her attorney no longer looked like a man driving the conversation. He looked like a man counting exits. Denise closed the folder halfway, not all the way. Here is where this stands, she said. Your demand has no legal foundation under the agreement your client signed. If you withdraw it today, Mr. Whitaker will consider the matter closed. If you proceed, we will respond formally and include the undisclosed transfers, the closed savings account, and the incomplete financial disclosures from the original divorce. The younger man behind Bradley finally opened the gray folder, but only enough to glance inside. Damon saw a printed article clipped to the top, his own face beside the valuation number. Not evidence. Pressure. A story they had planned to carry into the room until the facts made it useless. Bradley touched Monica's arm lightly, not affectionately, but professionally, the way an attorney steadies a client before recommending retreat. "We should confer," he said. Monica did not move at first. Her gaze stayed on Damon, and for a moment he saw the woman from the old house, standing under the kitchen light, telling him she could not build her life around potential. Years ago, those words had followed him into a freight office, onto a cracked sofa, through cold emails and rejections, through nights when success felt less like destiny than stubbornness. Now they had returned to the room stripped of their power. Damon stood. The chair moved back with a soft scrape against the floor. Everyone looked at him. He buttoned his suit jacket slowly, not for effect, but because the meeting was over for him. "You can talk with Denise from here." Monica blinked. "That is it." Damon looked at her, truly looked, without anger, without longing, without the old ache that used to make him search her face for some version of the woman he had married. "You did not come here for me," he said. "You came here for what you thought you could still take." The words were calm. That made them final. Monica's face shifted, but he did not wait for the next expression. He turned toward the door. Through the glass walls, he could see his employees moving through the office beyond, people carrying folders, answering calls, building something that did not depend on Monica's belief. Alicia stood near the reception desk, pretending not to watch. Damon gave her a small nod as he passed. Behind him, Denise's voice resumed, steady and precise, already reducing Monica's demand to procedure. Damon walked down the corridor toward the smaller conference room where his leadership team waited for the acquisition meeting. The city stretched beyond the windows, bright and indifferent. He paused once beside the glass and looked at the streets far below. 3 years earlier, he had left a house with 2 suitcases and an idea someone called worthless. Now the idea had become walls, payroll, contracts, futures, proof. He did not feel the victory the way he once imagined victory would feel. There was no thunder in it. No applause. Only space. Clean, quiet space where humiliation used to live. Damon opened the next conference room door and stepped inside. On the table, the final agreement waited beside a silver pen and a glass of water. He sat at the head of the table, picked up the pen,